Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back.
Hey everybody.
So, real quick, kind of quick housekeeping. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. We're trying to build up our subscribers. Also, if you're listening to us on podcast, please make sure to follow us wherever you're hearing us from. So, it doesn't cost you guys a thing, and sure would help us out a great deal. So, anyway, aside from that, with our show, we cover a lot of really interesting things with paranormal and sometimes not so paranormal, but you typically remember some of the, I guess, the big show ticket items, like the Loch Nesses and the Draculas and all the stuff that everybody knows, about paranormal and things like that. But for once in a while, something gets thrown at you that I know I certainly never heard of before.
I have not heard of this.
And, yeah, it's got kind of a little bit of everything, a little bit of, true crime, a little bit of
mixed with paranormal,
mixed with
and holiday.
Yeah, it's interesting. And if you clicked on this, whether it's on podcast or YouTube, you kind of have an idea. And we're going to be talking about Duffy's Cut. Now, I know that some of you probably have no idea what that is, and this is what this show is about, but it is such an intriguing story.
It is.
But kind of getting into it, a former Pennsylvania railroad worker, that's a tongue twister, Joseph Trapician, whichever way we're going to go with that, but that's kind of where we're going to go. He would tell a story to his grandsons Bill and Frank every Thanksgiving, and it's quite an interesting story to tell somebody on Thanksgiving. But he would tell them that in 1832, a man was walking home from a tavern where he saw blue and green ghosts dancing in the mist on one September night. And the story sort of goes like this. The person walking home, now this is going to be in an accent, I'm guessing is how it would have been for the time, but he kind of goes like this. I saw it with my own eyes, the ghost of the Irishman who died with cholera a month ago. A dancing around a big trench where they were buried. It's true, mister. It was awful. Why? They looked as they were kind of green and blue fire, and they were a hopping and bopping on their graves. And I heard the Irishmen were haunting the place because they were buried without benefit of clergy. Which, by the way, I know it sounded funny, but that's kind of an interesting point. So, anyway, Bill and Frank Watson were told a chilling tale about 57 immigrants who died at the railroad site in Pennsylvania during cholera epidemic of 1832. Now, the area is known as Duffy's Cut, as the rail worker's boss was named Philip Duffy, and it's a stretch of tracks located around 30 miles from Pennsylvania between Malvern and Fraser. So that's kind of the quote-unquote tee-off, so to speak, of kind of where this story kicks off for us. So, yeah, it's... Like I said, that's kind of an interesting story to tell somebody on Thanksgiving, But hey, it's pretty cool anyway.
So, Philadelphia between Malvern and Fraser.
Oh, what did I say?
Pennsylvania. Just to correct that before we go forward.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So, starting in 1832. Okay. So the time period for this is there's a ton of industrial revolution happening in America. Okay. We've got a lot of Irish coming to the States to work.
Right.
Okay. Now this is before the potato famine.
Okay.
So potato famine, I believe, started in 1847. So they're not coming from that, but they were still poor.
Right.
They needed money. They were coming over to work.
Yeah, to be perfectly clear, the potato famine obviously was devastating to the Irish economy, but they were already
poor.
Yeah, they were already in some dire straits, yeah.
So in June of 1832, there was a bunch of Irish that sailed for it was 3 months.
Oof,
3 month sail from Ireland on the ship called the John Stamp.
Okay.
And there were 57 men and 2 women
Wow.
So there were 2 women, and they were sailing to Philadelphia. Okay. With hopes of finding work and beginning a new life in the U.S.
Right.
Okay. But before they could actually dock in Philly, they had to the ship went up the Delaware River, and they had to stop. And at this stop, there was a quarantine hospital, and it was the first in the country that we had, called the Lazaretto.
Right. And they call that a choke point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this time period in the States, there was a lot of cholera. Like, it was raging all over the world.
Right.
Not just in the States, but, everywhere.
Pandemic.
Yes, a pandemic. And unfortunately, at the time, the way the Irish were looked upon by the U.S., they were the immigrants. They were dirty. They were poor. They didn't even think of them as white people.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So they were very much so looked down on. And when you look at a group of people like that, who do you blame for sickness?
Yeah, them.
So the Irish was, they were all blamed for bringing cholera to the States.
Yeah, it's amazing how
things haven't changed much. Yes.
Yeah.
But we'll get off that political
just digress for just a bit.
But so these all ships coming in to this area would have to stop at this quarantine, and they'd have to get off, and they'd, make sure, and they'd check everybody and make sure they didn't have any signs of sickness.
Right.
And if you were found to have any signs of it, you were not allowed to, get back on the ship. Basically.
So, you couldn't get back on the ship. You sure as hell couldn't go in.
No.
Yeah.
I think they probably would just send you back.
Yeah.
To wherever you came from.
Yeah.
If you made it anyway.
Yeah.
But the ones that were found to be okay, they let you get back on the ship, and then you could continue on to wherever you were going. And in this case, it was Philadelphia.
Right.
Okay. So all these people, all these 57 Irish women, men on the John stamp were not found to have any kind of sickness. Okay.
That, folks, is an important detail.
It is an important detail. So they were allowed back on. They docked in Philly, and they got off the ship, and, they kind of scattered.
Yeah.
Some went here, some went there, wherever they were, could find work, basically.
Yeah.
But this specific one is important. Because we actually, they have the ship manifests.
Yep.
And they have the names of these people. And these 57 all basically stayed together.
Right.
Okay.
Which I find that unusual,
Yeah.
But I guess if you're...
But if one finds work, the rest are going to follow. I mean,
right.
They're not going to... And there must have been, specific places that, were told to go to.
Well, and I guess I say that's unusual, but even like in the military, when you're with a bunch of people you first start out with, there's like a comfort in that.
Yeah.
So you look to stay with the people that you kind of started with. So, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
And speaking of this, before we get off the cholera thing, so what I find funny about this is they found out that cholera wasn't coming in from the ship ports necessarily that way. That they said wherever they were sailing into Canada, it was traveling downwards. So from Canada to New York, and then down to Philly, and on down.
Yeah.
So that's what I find interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, they had to check the ships. I understand that.
Oh yeah.
But why did it start? I know a lot of Irish came into Canada as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they came from everywhere.
Well, and of course, things back then were so much different than they are now. At least as far as that part's concerned, border and how things migrate. Anyway,
right.
Yeah.
So as far as the U.S. is concerned, okay. So I talked about Industrial Revolution is ramping up. Okay, so trains were a new technology.
Yes.
Okay, they had just come about with them. So what are they starting to do? Starting to lay down tracks.
Railroad tracks,
right? So Philadelphia happened to be a major port of entry.
Right.
For this industrial labor. Okay. So the mainline public works, which is the company. Okay. They stretched from Philly out to Pittsburgh.
Okay. That's a good clip.
Yes. That's especially for 1832.
Yeah.
Okay. And there was a contractor by the name of Philip Duffy. And he was responsible for building mile 59 of the train line between Paoli and Fraser.
Okay.
Okay, so these are small towns in between. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He happened to also, with the name of Duffy, he was an Irishman.
Yes, he was.
Okay. And he came from the same area as these people that had come in.
Well, that's awfully advantageous.
But he didn't use it for good. He used it for bad.
Of course.
He used his, I'm an Irishman, I'll get you good work. And instead he used it to get cheap labor and pay these guys, girls and guys, nothing, basically.
Yeah. And I'm sure to them it was a fortune, but still.
Well, maybe not a fortune, but it was something.
Yeah, I mean, they could sustain.
They're used to nothing.
Yeah.
Yes. So he hired a crew of Irish workers on the dock located near the Washington Avenue Immigration Station, also known as Pier 53. So I'm guessing this was really close to where they docked, and that's probably an easy way to just go and pick up workers.
Yeah, and I kind of have a recollection of this. I once had a job where I had to fly everywhere in the world, it seemed like, and I was staying really close to the airport in Philadelphia. And I remember hearing Pier 53. So I don't know if you guys are in Philadelphia, you could probably square me away. But I remember hearing about that. I don't know if there's as I'm sure the choke point's still there. So yeah, I mean it's interesting.
Now, most of these workers that came from Ireland, came from the counties of Derry, Donegal, and Tyrone.
Okay.
Okay, and those are all in the north. In the, I guess if they call it the area or the county of Ulster.
Okay.
Okay, so that's all at the top of Ireland. There were advertisements at the time in Ireland promoting railroad labor in the U.S.
Yeah.
So when they see this, they're starving. Okay, we're going to go to America and we're going to work on the railroad. So that's probably another reason, they just went straight. I'm sure there were signs pointing, hey, go here, or, whatever.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's kind of a double-edged sword. You don't know what railroad work is because it's a new invention. So you have no idea
what you're getting into. Yeah. Now, Mile 59 apparently was the most expensive contract that they had for building this whole track between these two points. Okay. And the work was really hard because I guess in that area there was a lot of limestone that they had to break through and all this stuff. So it was the hardest work there was.
Yeah.
Okay. And at the time, and not only just at the time, but even now, I mean, in Ireland, you had Irish Catholics. You also had Irish Protestants. And whether you know any history about Ireland or not, there's always been fights, religious wars about that, you know, a lot of it, wars about it. So, yes, all the Irish that came over were treated badly.
Mm-hmm.
However, the Irish Catholics were treated the worst.
Yeah.
Okay. They were. And as far as U.S. citizens, or however you want to put that, at that time, they looked down at the Irish because they, like I said before, they didn't view them as white. They even looked down on them more than they looked down at the Africans coming from Africa, or the Jewish coming from multiple countries in the world, because they viewed them because they were underneath British rule.
Yeah.
And so they looked at them as still being technical slaves that were escaping from their masters, basically.
Yeah.
Which is just terrible.
They were subhuman to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's been multiple things in history that they even try to say that this never happened, and that, a lot of the time. But they found pictures of Irish need not apply. Irish may not use these bathrooms, and they say, a lot of history, that never happened.
Your vision is history.
False. Yeah. That's what I say. False. So they weren't looked at as humans. It was never about necessarily the color of your skin. It's how you're looked upon.
Social status.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, they were starving.
Yeah.
They were dirty. I mean, they could, all that stuff because they were poor. So just to kind of, give everybody a picture of this.
Yeah.
So not only were you Irish, but now you're a sect of Irish that's looked down on even more than the Protestants.
Yes.
So you're the Irish Catholics.
And if anybody understands what being a minority of a minority is, That's a rock and a hard place.
So if you were Irish Catholic, and a lot were coming from this area in Ireland, in Ulster, okay, they were always given the worst work that you could get.
Yeah.
Because they were looked at like they weren't people. Like, you're just, I'll give you this tiny wage. You're going to work the hardest out of everybody. And I don't really care if you die. Like, as long as I get what I need out of you.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it came to the railroad work itself, I was reading that when they take a group of Irish out to the lines, the Protestants of that group would get to work on top, like doing the stuff on top of the railroad.
Oh, okay.
Like the tracks, like doing whatever they got to do to put the tracks on. The Catholics were giving the stuff underneath, so digging out the roads, all the stuff that's the hard back-breaking work. Not only that, but there was a lot more risk of getting hurt and getting killed.
Yeah.
So this is the picture of what these people were walking into, basically. Had no idea, by the way. Okay, so now that we've set the scene.
Yeah.
Okay, so Duffy took the workers out to Malvern, which is the place where Duffy's Cut is. And they set up an encampment in the valley. Okay. And this is the time frame they're working during, like, July and August, when it's the hottest and the most humid. And if you're coming from Ireland to the States,
I mean, you're not
that's
used
a huge no. Okay. And there is local streams, close. So they would go get water. And of course, they're sharing water. Well,
cholera.
That's how cholera can get spread.
Yeah.
Okay. So it comes out of contaminated water.
Yeah.
And it's, from what I understand, like stomach upset, diarrhea,
dysentery,
all that type of stuff. It's a horrible, long death.
Yes.
Okay.
However, and this will come into play later, not always fatal.
No. But if you're starving and your body's already knocked down a few notches.
For sure.
Now it is possible that a few of these, people contracted cholera from the water.
Sure.
But once word got out and some of them were sick and they wanted to leave and, go rest up or get better, the locals in the town closest to them started hearing the Irish working the railroad have cholera. And what always happens when people like to talk? They spread misinformation. They get fearful. They start panicking. Okay. So that's the scene we're at right now.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, kind of getting back to the brothers, right? So Frank and Bill Watson, they inherited railroad papers. That is just
you have a hard time with that word.
I tell you, folks, that word is just beating me up tonight. Anyway, inherited railroad papers about Duffy's Cut from their grandfather, who had worked for the president of the railroad, Martin Clement. Now, for decades, Clement compiled tons of research about the event, and one of the documents said X marks the spot. Now, you guys don't have to be a treasure hunter to realize what that means. They suspected that the files contained clues of the location of a mass grave. Since
they heard the story about growing up every Thanksgiving.
Exactly.
Like, X marks the spot to what?
To what? Right.
There's 57 people that died, right? We know this.
What we know, yeah.
Going into it.
So, as Frank and Bill delved deeper into the case, they started digging around 2002, and 5 years later found wooden pipes and with dairy carved in them in the stem of it. Now, dairy, as you know, was one of the locations
these came, they came
from.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they also found like shoe buckles, buttons, utensils, and other shards of dishware. Now, what's interesting about that is the brothers didn't believe that struggling laborers like that would just discard these items, because they were valuable. Right. You wouldn't just toss them aside. They're valuable items. So, yeah, I mean, things are starting to turn around a little bit as far as the story.
So, now that they've found these artifacts in the ground, okay, now they're like, okay, we found this. What else is out there? Right? So, one of the, I think it's Bill maybe. Bill was the one that was a professor at
Right.
the local university.
Right.
So he had access to a lot of people than he knew because it was a little easier to get these things done, and get permits and stuff. So they hired this guy who came out and he used this electrical imaging, machine that basically, correct me if I'm wrong, it kind of like sends a pulse down through the ground and it can map out areas where it looks not hollow, but you know what I'm saying? Like things have been moved or missing.
So it's a little bit different than ground penetrating radar. It's kind of in the same family,
right?
But it looks for hot spots where ground had been disturbed if something organic had started to decay there.
Right.
It kind of has like a FLIR. If you know what FLIR is, you get like that hot or cold spot that's blue, and then you get like a very bright orange or yellow for hot. It's very similar to that, but it, like I said, it's very similar to ground penetrating radar, but just a little bit different.
So they had this done in March of 2009. Okay, so it led them, and they found coffins.
Imagine that.
15 to 20 feet down the embankment.
That's a long way down there.
Now, once they obviously got them up, there was a physical anthropologist by the name of Janet Monhay, and there were bones from at least 7 skeletons, including 4 skulls, involved in this.
Yeah.
Now, she determined that the average age of the workers was probably around 22 years old, which is really sad.
Yeah.
They were young. And the bodies had signs of death caused by extreme violence. Does that sound like cholera to you?
That's important.
And this is actually a quote from her. She said, "One skull has a little divot on what would have been the side bone of the skull. That little divot is something that didn't happen when they excavated it out of the ground." Yeah. And she speculated that one of the laborers may have been what she put in terms of clunked on top of the head before they died.
Bludgeoned.
Yeah. Now, the teams also uncovered a skull that had been pierced by a bullet and cleaved by a hatchet.
Yikes.
One worker's skull showed extreme signs of brutality, and he was apparently over like 6 feet tall. So it led them to believe that, because he was bigger, that he was fighting off whatever.
Yeah.
And, they had to do both. And his skull had both a large 5-inch axe blow on one side and a gunshot to the crown of his head. So they probably... it sounds to me like you think of these Celtic warriors.
Oh, yeah,
like
they're straight badass.
They axed him, and it didn't stop him. This like, boom. Like, that's what I like have in my head.
Probably scared the crap out of the people that were assaulting them, too.
Yeah. I mean, that's really tall for a lot of Irishmen are not. Well, that's not true.
Well,
Liam Neeson. Yeah, but Liam Neeson's very tall, but a lot of them have Viking blood, so it makes it taller.
Set of skills.
Yeah, but like you don't think of them as being super tall like that. So yeah, they had a fight on their hands with him, but I mean, it shows.
Good. I'm glad he gave him some hell.
Yeah. Now, Bill Watson said that the coffins, so when they pulled the coffins up, it was really weird. They had been nailed shut with more than 100 nails on every coffin.
And that's important because this is just a band name. I get it, but there's a reason it was called that, 9-inch nails. These things were not just your average.
They didn't have the short little
no
picture nails.
Now, and they didn't have like obviously didn't have an electric or pneumatic kind of thing where you could just pop, get them in. I mean, it took somebody a lot of time to nail in big ass nails like that 100 times over on a coffin.
Which we'll get to later about this. Now, they because they only found the 7 bodies is what they thought. Okay, they're like, where are the rest of the 50 of these people? Okay, so they surveyed the ground again later, looking for them, and they found this huge anomaly. Okay, which was laying right next to the Amtrak line.
Yep.
Okay, so I can't really dig that up.
No.
So it has to be left. So it's left. And from what the radar showed, they think they're at a depth of 20 feet. But it's not showing like coffin size. It'd be more like
a pit.
piled, like a pit, like mass grave, which is what they were expecting to find in the first place. And so with the whole coffin thing, that was what threw me off. I'm like, well, why would they, bury them? But what they believe is that, maybe somebody came in, did something, and the other workers, gave them a Catholic burial.
Right. An actual correct burial.
Right. And then, or those were the, well, no, because some of them had the thing to them. So that's where they think that happened. And then the second time around, they got the rest of them.
We'll get to that part too. Yeah.
Yes.
But, I strongly believe that, and kind of getting into this, because this is where
you can't really talk about it without kind of giving it away.
Yeah.
I mean, you already know that they've been attacked. So.
Well, and of course, it's strongly believed that a group of vigilantes formed up and they connected to the East Whiteland Horse Company owned by the Pratt family, who also owned that mile of the track. Isn't that convenient?
Mm-hmm.
The Irish crew was surrounded and viciously killed by axe blows or gunshots to the head. Cholera.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't mean to laugh, but my goodness. The men were thrown in a mass grave and the story was kept quiet. Duffy did not want word getting back to Ireland, obviously, as no one would want to come and work for him and would lose contract jobs. He hired another Irish crew shortly after the killings to finish mile 59, and that advantageous for him.
Mm-hmm.
The remains of the 5 men and 1 woman from those who died at Duffy's Cut were laid to rest at a ceremony in West Laurel Hill, Pennsylvania in 2012. Now, you got to think about that. That is a long time between
1832.
Yeah, 1832 to 2012 to get a proper burial.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, geez. And a monument with a large Celtic cross was erected to honor the names with all the victims from the 1832 group.
And the reason, I mean, they had the names from the ship manifest.
Right, the manifest.
That's how they were able to find them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That also is very important.
Mm-hmm.
The body of teenager John Ruddy, I'm guessing, who was from County Donegal, was repatriated back to Ireland. So, he got to go back.
He was able to go back to Ireland.
And the burial took place in County Tyrone for Catherine Burns in October of 2015. So yet again, a whole long time after that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Duffy's Cut later became part of the Pennsylvania Railroad's main line. Still used today.
And from what I understand, if you take that Amtrak line, if you look out the window, it is literally like right there.
Oh, yeah.
And they have like a big, so that guy that the grandfather worked for, that Clement. He had actually went out there and erected, because he felt so bad when he discovered this stuff, that he erected like a stone wall around where he thought, the thing to kind of honor them in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Because
like a monument type.
Yeah. I mean, they covered it up.
They did.
And they spread the cholera thing to cover up all these killings. I mean, the thing is, whether it was they believed they all, had cholera and they were going to infect everyone and they came and killed them all, or is it they just hated them? It's one of the two.
All the above?
Yeah.
Well,
or probably both is going to be my guess.
Here's the thing that is disgusting and interesting, all of those wrapped into one. I'd mentioned at the beginning of the show that not everybody died from cholera.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they said anywhere from 40 to 60% of people who caught it died. Mm-hmm. So it's not 100% lethal. I mean, it's very, very close to being lethal.
Yeah.
So, quick math, and I'm not a mathematician.
It's not like the Black Plague or anything.
You can survive.
Or smallpox. It's not like that.
And it affects the elderly or anybody who has, other issues, like any other disease would.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I say that. There were 57 people. Doing math, and like I said, I'm not a mathematician. Where are the other 35 that survived? Because that's what it would lead you to. About 35 people, so to speak, would have lived through that cholera epidemic in that little tiny set group.
Mm-hmm. And they left all their stuff behind.
Yeah, and they just left it all behind. I mean,
it was like it happened and they covered up. And that was the other thing. I thought, well, wouldn't they have like stolen their items? Because those were important items to have. I mean,
Yeah.
people didn't have a lot of money back then, but they were just like, I think, in a rush just to
for sure.
cover it up. And as far as the coffins and the nails, 100 nails, it was basically, thought that they didn't want anyone discovering.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of time and effort to get all those out, right?
Yeah, well, we found it in 2012, which they could make quick work out of that.
Yeah, so you can't just pop it off and see if they died from a sickness, which most people wouldn't, but they didn't want them to see cracks in the head and bullet wounds and everything else, because then people would start to question things.
Don't want that.
And from what I understand is there was, maybe a couple of people that did get cholera. They got sick. And I think they were trying to get, walking away from camp, because they can't be working with cholera. And they were discovered trying to leave camp. And then they thought, okay, they're going to come infect us all. And I think that's what started this whole thing off. And they're like, no, we've got to stop them. Now they're all going to infect us. These
familiarities.
Immigrants, non-whites are going to, kill us all. Right?
These subhumanoids.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to go just get rid of them. And then we don't have to worry about it.
It's disgusting.
And I think that's basically what happened.
And I am not a historian, nor is my lovely wife. However, you got to believe that that's what happened. I mean...
Yeah. Well, I mean they've got forensic evidence now that they weren't. Yeah,
so that's the way I feel about that one.
Yeah,
folks, you can decide how you want to about it. Leave the comments. Tell me how wrong I am, but that's what happened.
Mm-hmm. So this area of Duffy's Cut, is like a really heavily wooded. It's like when you get on a train and you're going through, outskirts of a place. There's woods on the side of the train. You look out the window. Okay, so this is the area. And the early Lenape is, I believe, how it is pronounced, Native Americans, which basically, I guess because we couldn't pronounce it in the first place, changed it to the Delaware. So everybody's heard of the Delaware natives. And it's because that Delaware River runs through there. So that's who they were. They basically labeled this area the Dark Valley, which is almost like a premonition to me.
Yes,
just a little bit weird. Now, this university that I think it's Bill, I believe, Bill Watson is the professor at, or was at the time, is called Immaculate University. And that's like a Catholic thing, right?
Yep.
Immaculate. Okay, now it's only a couple miles from Duffy's Cut. And when they found the artifacts, like the pipes and all that type of stuff, they put it in the university in a museum for the local area.
And all you paranormal folks, sit tight. Here it comes.
Now, at Immaculate, there are tons of reports of sightings.
Yeah.
Now, I tried to track down now I have a couple for you, but a lot of sightings, which I didn't get specifics. I just found that the staff and the students all see things there.
And you would, so you, once again, depending on how you feel about attachments to certain items, whether or not people feel there's, granted, you can say that a particular home is haunted or has something to it. A lot can be said. A lot of people say that just items that somebody owned could be an attachment to that, and they follow that as well. So you've got potentially, arguably, for sure, 57 people that were massively mass murdered. And they had all their stuff basically thrown around. Oh, and by the way, they're taking all the remains and throwing them in a massive pit. I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
So yeah, why not? If there's ever an argument to be made of a place that would have some kind of haunting, would be a place that houses all these artifacts.
And they have paranormal activity around the actual items, but it's not just that. They see things on campus as well, because you're only 2 miles away.
Yeah.
Now, this is what's interesting. So we're going to backtrack just a little bit. Okay, so the grandfather has passed away. He has left these documents to his grandsons, okay? But they didn't look at them right away. They put them back like in a closet, like we do, okay?
Yeah.
And so this is about 2 years after this what I'm about to talk about happens. So Bill Watson, he's the professor at the university, and one of his friends in 2000 were looking out a window on campus, and they saw 3 glowing figures standing on the lawn. Okay? And this is a quote from him. He said, "It looked like neon lights in the shape of men. I thought it was something to do with an art show. We went outside to the lawn to see them, but they were gone. Nothing was there that could have caused it. It was Hollywood-type special effects. I've never seen anything before or since like that." He sees this, okay, and then he remembers the story.
Right. I was just about to say that.
As a child.
Yeah.
Okay. So he goes, opens the files, and then finds that X marks the spot. And he also finds the account of the story that his grandfather used to tell him.
Yeah. Not such a funny limerick I did in the beginning, was it?
Now, it's just super interesting. And of course they see, lights are seen in the forest around Duffy's Cut. And what I find, if you remember the story, what he said in the beginning of like the lights bobbing. And the first thing I thought about, and even the guy said, a dancing around.
Yeah.
When you think of Ireland and you think of people from Ireland, and usually their persona,
right? They're
happy-go-lucky.
Yeah.
You talk about the Irish jig because it's like a bounce. It's like a dance.
That's right.
And even their funerals, their wakes, they call them Irish wakes for a reason. They party it up. They honor those people. They party it up. They sing, they dance, they drink. They do all the above things. But I mean, they embrace. It's somber, but it's also a dedication to life,
right? And
to, be happy that person lived, and to celebrate still being alive, the rest of them, and that's how they honor that person. So seeing those lights, when I heard that account, I was like, that would be the perfect representation of, now, not a mass grave, but an Irishman making themselves known, like a dancing on top of the grave.
You bet. I mean, and first of all, the Irish community that listens to us, man, your guys' strength to be able to do that in a time that tough to go through.
Yeah.
I've got a tremendous amount of respect for that, because I don't know that I have that kind of strength. But yeah, you always see these Irish wakes, and it's something to behold. Yeah. And you would think, especially immigrants of that time, like we said at the beginning, they stuck together. So if they wanted to be found, or they want their stories mentioned, maybe that's how they do come across, as dancing lights, and like you said,
I find it interesting they said they were green.
Yeah.
Because the green of Ireland, it's the representation.
Absolutely.
So it almost brought like a smile to my face, like kind of hearing that, not that they're gone, but like, hey, we're here still. Find us. And that's what I love about this whole story, is that these bodies were all found because a couple of boys remember their grandfather's stories from childhood. Every Thanksgiving he'd tell them. And I just picture, like, I don't know who would be a good grandfather from the movies that you could think about that would talk like that,
I don't know, but I could see Tom Hanks doing that as he gets older,
Yeah, like, the jovial grandfather that's like, oh, you guys want to hear a ghost story? And like every year you hear it, but
maybe Dan Aykroyd?
I don't know.
I kind of see that.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, every year, the same story, but the kids always want to hear it. Like, it's just like, oh, let's tell you this, So remembering that, him having his own experience, and then remembering those stories, and then going back in the papers and finding could be something out there, and then finding these bodies and making things right. I just got to give it to Bill and Frank Watson for doing that, because it struck, I've got Irish ancestry, so it struck me here.
Yep.
You know,
Maiden name is Callahan, guys.
Yep. Get a little
yeah,
watery eye.
and you should. It's yeah.
They're, you know, a strong people, and everybody deserves, you know, to rest in peace.
Absolutely.
Basically. So I think that, and just like the ghost story led to them being found. It's just, you know, it's crazy.
It's fitting. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's another one of those stories where, you know, we bring you facts, and there were definitely facts here. You know, this place exists. You can go there.
You can go there. They have, well, they have like, you know, the memorial where they reburied them. But there's still bodies out there.
Yes, there are.
They don't know how many, but they're assuming it's the other 50.
Right.
Who knows? There could be more. I mean, as many Irishmen that came, and women that came and finished that railroad.
Yes.
Lord knows what's out in those woods. I mean, there could be many more.
And to think you're traveling. So if you're taking an Amtrak on that stretch, I mean, you're legitimately, potentially, and quite honestly you're basically going over grave sites, you know. And to be honest with you, that's probably true all through the U.S. I don't think that particular part is any different than, you know, obviously there was some, maybe a story we'll get to at some point. There were just some horrific atrocities done to the Chinese when they came to work the railroads.
Yes,
and I guarantee you there are places that railroads are that there would probably be the same thing. This is just one story. But it's just interesting because we have a marker now. We know exactly where this particular place was. And I mean, obviously it's probably difficult to get to, but if you ever wanted to go there, there is that memorial set up by Clement. And then of course the gravesite one. So
yeah. And I think they also, we'll put it on here. They have a memorial plaque. I don't think it's at Duffy's Cut. I think it's actually where the Celtic cross is, but they have the names of all the people that passed from at least the ship's manifest that they believe. And something else that we didn't mention is they were able to take DNA and match it to people that still currently live in Ireland, and they were able to. And one of the things I just found fascinating is I can't remember which one it was. It was one of the ones they had the name for that came out of the coffin, and something about his mouth or his jaw. And they found someone with the same last name in Ireland, and they have that same defect.
Really?
In their jawbone. And so it's passed down. And so they were able to like corroborate that they were family.
That's crazy. I mean, it makes sense. It's DNA, it's science, but it's like to have that same
But
defect?
from 1832 to now, like in the early 2000s when this happened. I mean, you know, our genetics passed down. I mean, we look like our ancestors. I mean, some people look like their great-great-grandmother or great-great-grandfather, you know. That stuff repeats.
Sure does. And it's not just a video game.
No.
Assassin's Creed. Sorry. Had to throw that in there. Anyway, so great.
We just need to remember that, especially if you're from the United States and you're listening, we are very fortunate to have this country. Our country was built on the sweat and the tears and of all our ancestors before that came here. And, you know, mothers and fathers lost their sons and daughters. I mean, a lot were sent here.
Families
as
were erased.
Indentured servants that had to work off their time for basically doing nothing wrong. They had hard lives. And we're all here because of it, you know, and I think a lot of the time we take that for granted.
Absolutely.
And the one thing I am glad to see is a lot of people are starting to really want to reach back and find out where they came from, especially, you know, and I've said this before, other countries don't understand that.
No.
But we know we didn't come from here exception of the natives. You know, if you're native, you know that your people came from here, but for the rest of us, we know we're just a combination of a whole bunch of other countries around the world.
Yep.
And so for us, I think we just need that tie of where we came from. And so we need to remember that and remember what they went through. And most people don't know these stories. Like when I discovered this, I'm like, how did we not know about this?
Yep.
I was an adult at this time period when this happened, but we're not on the East Coast. And I think a lot of this got reported on the East Coast.
For sure.
But I think it's important to tell these stories and honor these people.
Yeah.
They were young, 22
they were very
years
young.
old, trying to make a better life.
Yeah.
And then right after that, the potato famine started.
Boy, I tell you, talk about a 1-2 punch.
Mm-hmm. They had it really hard. So
yeah, well,
we just wanted to bring this story to you today because it's got a little bit of crime and it's got a little bit of paranormal. Paranormal helped solve the crime.
It's true. It's exactly what it was.
Mm-hmm. And the story got repeated every Thanksgiving.
And this episode is going to be released
right before
Thanksgiving. So be thankful for what you have. Be thankful for all the people that went through this for our country. And, hey, have a great Thanksgiving. Spend time with your family. Don't forget to subscribe and help us out. And, we'll catch up with you guys next time.
See you next week.
All right. Have a good one.